Let me welcome in Ashwini Agarwal, founder and partner Demeter Advisors. And let's sort of, pivot this conversation a little bit towards financial markets as well. Ashwini, I trust you heard, our colleague Parikshit explain it, Shereen earlier as well, in terms of what has happened since last night, that recapping the briefing from the government as well. How do you see financial markets sort of dealing with all of this as we go through it? And I imagine this is going to persist over the next couple of days at least.
Hi. Thanks for having me here. Prashant, the way I think about it is that last couple of days, while we've seen some softness in the markets inherently have believed that this escalation will not be significant and it'll probably end without much loss of life or property. But the escalation seen overnight and, what your program has carried and various other news channels have carried, and indeed the Ministry of Defense briefings seem to indicate that things are getting a little bit hotter than what the market is prepared for. So I would imagine that over the next few days, you will see more nervousness coming through. But from my standpoint, I think, this is fog of war. None of us really know what will happen and how long it will carry on and what will finally the end game be. But if history is any suggestion, I would encourage investors to not panic and look at the longer term picture, which I think remains reasonably constructive even as we go through this fog of war.
But do you get a sense, and you're absolutely right, Ashwini, markets have been very well behaved in that sense, right? We got a bit of a move in the rupee a day before yesterday. But apart from that, there's been no real big nervousness or panic at all. But as this lasts for longer, if this were to continue for a bit longer, these expectations which were so far, the thinking was that this is going to be limited, very limited, quick, and perhaps comes to an end quickly. That will change. The expectations, the market is pricing in will change as well.
Absolutely. I mean, if, what was earlier shown on this show, indeed, there is a ground engagement or there is an active air-to-air engagement as opposed to, air-to-military establishments or so on. If there is an active engagement, that changes the rules or that changes the assumption set the market is operating under, and that will cause some downside in the short run. Obviously, that will happen. Now, the question is that, what assumptions does the market make? Does the assumption be that this is a really long drawn-out affair that we haven't seen in the past, or if the past engagements are to go by, this is a 5-10 day affair? I mean, the extent of downside and the extent of panic will depend on those assumptions, and those assumptions will depend upon the kind of data points that we get from both government sources and from news channels like yourselves.
Yeah, Ashwini and Prashant, I just wanted to come in to make a point since we are talking about data sets that people are going to be looking at. While the military operations are on and currently underway as well, we're given to understand what's happening on the diplomatic side. So I just wanted to recap that for the benefit of our viewers once again and get Ashwini to respond to that as well. Several crucial calls and meetings have taken place. Secretary Mark Rubio, the US Secretary of State, has did a call with the Pakistan Prime Minister on the 8th and unequivocally said that, look, you need to de-escalate, but also said that you need to stop supporting terror groups. Here's the interesting thing. Rubio has done a call with Pakistan's Chief of Army. Now, remember, the war of escalation has really been driven by the commentary, by the comments that have come in from the Pakistan Chief of the Army. And that has been in many words, that has been the sort of trigger for perhaps the action that the Pakistanis have decided to take as well. So here is the Secretary of State dialing the Pakistan Chief of Army to say, look, let's get this engagement going. We're willing to support a dialogue between India and Pakistan. We've got the G7 coming out and pretty much saying essentially the same thing: exercise restraint and de-escalate and so on and so forth. And the Saudis have had meetings here in India and have had meetings in Pakistan as well. But so far, that doesn't seem to have had any impact on Pakistan and the action that Pakistan has taken so far. So Prashant, that's another important aspect to consider and an important aspect to factor. The global pressure is mounting, but so far, Pakistan not dialing down.
No, absolutely. Shereen, I can tell you this. I've spoken to so many people in the market, and we'll ask Ashwini about this as well. There is wide, and there are a lot of people who follow geopolitics closely, especially with regards to Pakistan. I mean, the widespread belief is the current army chief, General Munir, is someone who is far more radical as compared to the earlier one, General Bajwa, who is somebody that we could do business with. So I think that acknowledgement is very much there. And I think, as you said, and it was interesting, J.D. Vance, the vice president, earlier saying that, well, a war between India and Pakistan is none of our business. But, the thing about the current, and Ashwini, come in here, the thing about the current U.S. administration is that, well, things change on a dime. One day you say something, the other day you say something else. And from absolutely, this is your business, none of our business, it could turn. Any thoughts?
So, like you said, what's going to happen is going to be fairly unpredictable on a day-to-day basis. I think the call that has gone from Secretary of State to the Chief of Army in Pakistan is the right thing. I think de-escalation will help both countries. Now, whether the Pakistani army will heed to that call is anybody's guess. From India's standpoint, obviously, till the de-escalation is visible, there is no choice but to respond. And the risk that this process has is that it gets to a point where something seriously goes wrong, right? And that's not something which is in anybody's control, sitting outside of either in India or in Pakistan. So my sense is that the pressure will keep mounting. Both countries are nuclear equipped. Nobody wants to see a device being detonated. It would be terrible if that were to happen. So I think the pressure will escalate, and I hope that the saner voices on both sides will heed, and I think we will de-escalate and step back. In the short run, it's very difficult to say what will happen, but in the long run, I remain hopeful and constructive that we will find a way to normalize and de-escalate. It's, after all, in nobody's interest to have a full-scale war between the two countries.
But Ashwini, those statements kind of re-emphasize and refocus the very changed global dynamics, right? I mean, to think of the fact that the U.S. Vice President will say that a war is none of our business and, is their business, and I just hope they will solve this on their own. I mean, it kind of refocuses our minds to it's a very different world as compared to what it was for the last 30, 40 years. In that sense, one of the areas I think where we have focused on over the last few years is defense and defense manufacturing within country. I mean, eliminate stuff imports of stuff we can make here. Yeah. And that is a market kind of important sector as well, and the market's been appreciating it. I don't know if you have any thoughts there, Ashwini.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think with the events that have happened in the last few days and the shift in global geopolitics over the last 3 or 4 months, defense manufacturing is a huge opportunity, not only for the internal consumption of the armed forces in India, but even as an export opportunity for a number of countries in the Western Hemisphere or even in emerging markets. India clearly has the capability, both in terms of drones, in terms of munitions, and in terms of seagoing vessels, and dare I say, even in aircraft. And I think if we were to up the game in this area, and which I think the companies are very eager to do, both in private sector as well in public sector, and I think the government is making the right push, defense could emerge as a serious industrial activity in the country in the years to come. And I think it'll be wonderful. I still don't know, from a stock picking perspective, if there are opportunities out there, because the sector is quite expensive from a valuations perspective. But as a business and as a driver of economic activity, I think the best is yet to come.
No, absolutely, and I think over the this week, for that matter, if I were to sort of look at very here and now, I think the best performing index was the defense index, and we've had so many managements talking to us about a lot that what we're doing and what they're sort of doing as well. Ashwini, and sorry, Shereen, come on.
No, Prashant, I just wanted to make a point and get Ashwini's thoughts as well. Of course, war has costs that go beyond what is intended in terms of consequences. But at this point in time, and while we know that Pakistan finds itself in a very precarious position economically and has a lot to lose, but I'm wondering, Ashwini, this juncture for India, very, very crucial. I mean, in many ways, this has been the big India opportunity. This has been the big India moment, especially in light of the tariff war unleashed by the Trump administration, the supply chain diversification going on, Apple looking at moving more of its supply chain to India, and so on and so forth. I'm wondering if this, and we hope that this is going to be short and dealt with quickly, but if this prolongs, do you believe that this could impact decision-making, could impact sentiment with regards to people looking at India as an opportunity?
Shereen, you're right. I think if were to, so the way I think about it is three, right? If you make a very optimistic assumption, which the street has been making for the last couple of days, that this is a limited engagement, which is limited to drones, and the loss of life and property would be fairly minimal before a de-escalation happens, that's the most optimistic outcome. The less optimistic outcome is that there is a limited ground-to-ground, air-to-air engagement, limited to a few sectors, and that goes on maybe for a week or 10 days. That I don't think the market has priced in. We will probably see more downside to the market, but no significant damage to long-term economic outlook for the country. But if you make an assumption which is slightly different, which is that this is a longer-term active engagement, then I think we will have to go back to our drawing boards and figure out what's the way forward. I mean, GCCs, for example, they've been holding up the exports of IT services from the country. Now, there's a lot of manufacturing coming to India. There's a lot of, foreign interest in investing in India. Obviously, in the short run, people will look through the noise. But if it continues in the long run, then one has to reassess. I really hope that doesn't come to pass. Like you said, both countries have a lot to lose from a prolonged escalation. And I really, really hope that's not something we come to see.
Ashwini, to sort of talk about diplomatic efforts, right? I mean, the military pressure will be one thing, but diplomacy and what we can do behind the scenes, that I think the government is doing it. What is your sense, Ashwini? I mean, we saw this news that IMF has approved another tranche of that loan, extended one, and I think about $2+ billion or so. We've had a meeting, Dr. Jaishankar had a meeting with the Saudi minister 2 days back in Delhi. Do you think that's going to go a long way? We have, of course, much better relations with countries like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, etc. The Prime Minister has personally sort of seen to it. What's your sense?
My sense are twofold. One, that India is one of the top 5 economies in the world. Therefore, what we do and what we say makes a huge difference to pretty much every government in the world. Number two is that I think it's also a well-established fact that we have not been the aggressor. We have been at the receiving end of terrorism. And therefore, there is, if I may use the word, sympathy in favor of India. The third thing is that Pakistan also doesn't live in an isolated world. It needs the money, it needs the support from various countries. If you look at the last couple of years, the amount of financial assistance that has come to Pakistan from countries in the Middle East, including Saudi, etc., has been phenomenal in preventing a more precarious foreign exchange position in the country. So I think the diplomatic pressures will have a difference. And I think the fact that India is making all the right efforts in that direction, I hope will bear fruit and will help Pakistan de-escalate the situation we are facing today.
And Prashant, just on that, just wanted to point out that, since we were talking about who Rubio is dialing, and as I pointed out, on the 8th, he had spoken with the Pakistan Prime Minister. He's also spoken with Pakistan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar. Secretary Rubio reiterating that both parties must find ways to de-escalate the current situation and re-establish contact and communication. He's also offered U.S. assistance in starting a constructive dialogue between India and Pakistan. So it's been the Pakistan Prime Minister, the Pakistan Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, as well as the Pakistan Army Chief Asim Munir, who Secretary Rubio has spoken to, Prashant.
Shereen, if you wanted quickly, you spoke with, Ajay Banga recently. And I think you discussed many of these aspects, the water treaty, etc. as well, right? That's the other front in that sense. If you just want to sort of recap some of the main points there.
Absolutely. And, this is a region in a state of flux. It's a world in a state of flux, but this is also a region in a state of flux. You've got problems in Bangladesh. Sri Lanka is just about getting back to a path of recovery. And now this between India and Pakistan. Now, specifically as far as the Indus Waters Treaty is concerned, because remember, that was the first significant measure that was taken by India post-Pahalgam, when India said it is holding the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance. Now, what has been kind of reported or assumed or expected is that the World Bank would step in and try and intervene and try and negotiate some sort of a settlement as far as the Indus Waters Treaty is concerned, because the World Bank has actually been involved as a facilitator going back to 1960, when the Indus Waters Treaty was inked between India and Pakistan. Now, Banga making it clear to me in that interview, saying that, look, we have no role to play in how this treaty is executed. We can play the role of a facilitator. We can help with providing arbitrators, if that were to be the case, arrived at by the two sovereigns themselves. But outside of that, we have no role to play. So it's not like we can intervene on behalf of Pakistan, etc., which also has been part of the assumption that's been made. So there have been measures taken outside of the military measures. In fact, that was the very first significant step taken by India post-Pahalgam as a response. But of course, now it's the military escalation that one has to be mindful of. And overnight, as I pointed out, the hope that there would be any de-escalation, that is out of the window. What we have seen yesterday, the Pakistan response, the use of long-range missiles, the use of fighter jets in Indian airspace. Now, this is not de-escalation of any kind, This takes the game to a very, very different level. Of course, that is why we've had the Prime Minister meet with the three service chiefs, as well as the NSA Ajit Doval earlier this morning, to take stock of the situation. And there is expected to be an address to the nation by the Pakistan Prime Minister. So we'll have to watch that also.
Okay, welcome back to our continuous coverage of the India-Pakistan border tensions, the escalation overnight, and of course we are keeping an eye on markets as well with Ashwini Agarwal of Demeter Advisors. We were earlier talking about the IMF loan extension which has come through for Pakistan. Let's actually get this, put a little bit more clarity on this, some more context to this. My colleague Ritu is joining us with all of that. Ritu, take it away.
The International Monetary Fund has agreed to give Pakistan more than $2.4 billion in financial support following a key meeting of the IMF's executive board. Now, out of this, about $1 billion is going to be given to Pakistan right away. This is part of IMF's larger support program, which is called Extended Fund Facility, and that is meant to help countries fix serious economic problems. Now, IMF had approved this program for Pakistan last year for a total of a $7 billion loan that was to be spread over 37 months. And now, out of this, $2.1 billion has already been dispersed. Now, in addition to this, IMF has also approved another $1.4 billion for Pakistan through a separate program which is called the Resilience and Sustainability Facility. This program is meant to help countries deal with problems that are caused by climate change and to prepare for natural disasters. Now, IMF said it agreed to give Pakistan this money because it has shown progress in its economic reforms. But as we know, India has strongly disagreed with this IMF decision. It has argued that Pakistan has had a poor track record when it comes to previous financial aids. It has repeatedly sought bailout packages and warned that these funds could be misused, possibly to support cross-border terrorism. Now, since IMF rules don't allow countries to vote no against such proposals, India chose to abstain from the vote to mark its dissent. Now, at the IMF, voting power really depends on how much money a country contributes. So the US holds the most influence with about 16.5% of the voting share, and India, along with Bangladesh, Bhutan and Sri Lanka together, has around a 3% share. Now, India in its arguments also pointed to IMF's own report, which has suggested political reasons often influencing the fund's lending decisions. India, in fact, has said that the IMF keeps bailing out Pakistan despite the country's growing debt, which makes Pakistan too big to fail from the fund's point of view. It also warned giving money to a country which is accused of supporting terrorism sends a dangerous message to the global community. India also said that while its concerns on this IMF loan resonated with several member countries, IMF's ability to act on these concerns was limited by the fund's own rules and procedures that focus more on financial and technical criteria to consider these loans rather than moral or security concerns.
Ritu, thank you very much for that. You know, Ashwini, one of the big themes and big talking points from a slightly higher level has been this flow of money out of US assets into emerging markets, and India is starting to become a big recipient of it. And many have said that even without the earnings disappointment, etc., which earnings hopefully will pick up in the second half, but there aren't that many large, liquid, deep markets with rule of law, transparency, etc. You add this, what is going on right now into the mix. We are acting responsibly, in a transparent way. How do you think, this goes into that mix, that broader theme, which I think is playing out, and I think that view is becoming more and more mainstream, even as we speak with, global market participants almost each and every day. Your thoughts, Ashwini?
Great question. See, again, you've got to separate the long term from the short term. The outflow of investments from the US, which has been an exceptional recipient of foreign capital over the last 4 years with an exceptional stock market performance, and that seems to be reversing, led by a weaker US dollar. That's a long-term development in my view. The concern in India on account of what's going on at our borders is, to my mind, a short-term concern. The long-term flows pay less attention to short-term developments, treating these as a one-off, typically as you would do in a company where, let's say, one of the plants of a company was caught fire, maybe, or had an accident. You want to look past it and say, okay, fine, something happened, they'll figure out a way out of this, and the earnings will revert to the longer-term mean, longer-term trajectory. And that is what I think long-term money does. So I think that the money coming out of the US is a long-term phenomena that we're going to see for some time. And I think that India will get its fair share of those outflows is also a long-term outcome. At this point, day-to-day what happens is very difficult to say, but I don't think that the events going on at the border will have a meaningful impact on the flow into India, unless, of course, it develops into a much wider scale conflict, a longer conflict, which has serious economic impairment risk, which I don't believe to be the case, at least at this point.
Well, that certainly is the hope, Ashwini. But, Ashwini, outside of what is happening in this escalation of tensions and this conflict between India and Pakistan, there's plenty that we need to deal with and we need to factor in outside of this. the trade deal, the India-UK trade deal got done, the US-UK trade deal got done. Today, there are negotiations starting between the Chinese and the US administration in Geneva. So there is plenty that's happening outside of this escalating conflict. How much of those factors could also determine the way that flows move?
So there is going to be continuous news flow on how trade deals shape up. The trade deal that we saw with UK earlier in the week was, I think, very positive for India. The trade deal that we saw between the US and UK was also a very welcome move. To that extent, if trade picks up globally after going through a little bit of an air pocket in the first quarter of this calendar year, I think that's really good for overall economy across the world. I mean, at the end of the day, if there's one lesson to be learned from the last 100 years, it's that trade helps economies and trade brings prosperity to everyone in the world. So, I mean, of course, the US administration has its own goals and they are pursuing those goals. But if there are via media that can be found where trade deals take place and countries are able to trade with each other and bring efficiency to supply chains across the world, I think that's a great thing to do. In the Indian context, Shereen, I'm looking forward to the Europe trade deal that India is trying to put together. And of course, a deal with the US, which has been in the offing. And we hope that some announcements will be made in that regard in the near future, which will obviously, which will hopefully be positive for Indian companies and Indian manufacturing. So in addition to the defense opportunity, I do see these two events playing out in the near future, which should be positive for India.
Right. We will take a break then. Ashwini, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV18 on what is a difficult day, what has been a difficult time. And of course, all thoughts and prayers with our armed forces because they are battling it out at the front lines. The hope is that we don't actually see a ground offensive, but that indication did come in from the briefing of the Ministry of Defence and the Ministry of External Affairs that Pakistan has started to move troops to the forward areas. India will, of course, respond, but we certainly hope that that is not the case. We will take a break here, but return with our continuing coverage of the escalating tensions between India and Pakistan back in a moment.
Welcome back. This is our continuing coverage of the escalating tensions between India and Pakistan. Of course, recapping all of the developments which have been happening since late last night, this morning as well. And of course, that Government of India briefing, which we got to you. Ashwini Agarwal of Demeter Advisors has been with us over the hour. Ashwini, we've stayed away from markets near term because, frankly, there's no way to tell. And I think that's not the idea here. But we did speak about defense as a bit of a enduring theme, and I really think that could be, right? The issue with defense has been orders are lumpy, execution is lumpy, it's the nature of the business. But this now, in a way, does permanently the sector does permanently perhaps get a bit of a lift here, right? There is that aim of cutting down imports by, 70-80% by 2028-30. So that aim is already there, but I think this does give a fillip, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, there is, it's a surprise it hasn't happened till now because we've been one of the biggest buyers of arms in the world for many decades. And we have the capability both in the private sector and in the public sector. So there's no reason why we shouldn't exploit that capability and build arms not only for ourselves, but for the rest of the world. And I think the time has come and I think the capability is there. I think we've started to see the private sector get a meaningful role, at least at the, start to get a meaningful role in production of armaments and munitions. And I hope this will continue. So I'm very hopeful. From an economic standpoint, I don't know about stocks because stocks are expensive. But if the opportunity is large enough, then maybe even at these expensive valuations, they might make sense. That's difficult to tell, but as an economic opportunity, I'm very positive about it.
While we continue to track what happens at the border, and that remains foremost on our minds, Ashwini, Monday morning you'll have markets which open, and they will sort of trade through all of this. They will continue to, but it's not a near-term question, but a defense we spoke about. Any other sort of themes? I think textiles, and I think Shereen did speak about that FTA. I think you're on the board of a textile company as well. And it's been one of the best performing sectors over the last 1 week or so. The UK FTA, and perhaps more coming.
Absolutely. I think the free trade agreement with the UK, as you notice, has brought about a duty change for exports of garments from India from 12% to 0%. And that in a low unit priced product makes a big difference, right? So that does help the Indian companies, and UK market, while obviously not as large as the United States, it's not insignificant. It's about 30% of the size of United States as a market. And historically, Indian companies have had a huge disadvantage because of a 12% duty. Similarly, we are looking forward to the trade deal with Europe, where again, there are duties imposed on garment exports from India. Which might benefit if a duty exemption comes through with the trade treaty with Europe. So I'm personally looking forward to that as well. So I think, textiles and garments manufacturing is an opportunity for the Indian industry, and I hope we will do very well there in the years to come.
Anything else on your mind as thematically, Ashwini?
See, financials, especially the microfinance and unsecured personal loans, which have been under a microscopic focus for the last 3 or 4 quarters. I think we are at the peak of the problem, or we are past the peak of the problem. So my sense is that as the next couple of quarters unfold and incremental stress in these loan books starts to come down, you might see an opportunity there in stock prices. Balance sheets for most of the companies are pretty well capitalized. The business models make sense. So I think that's another area where there might be some opportunity. I'm a little bit concerned about state level legislation here and what impact it has. But the point remains that this is a need for the people. I mean, if microfinance is pushed out of the organized space and borrowers are forced to go to local money lenders and borrow at rates which are incomprehensible, in the organized market, I think it would do no help to anyone. So I think barring that small risk, and I think, history tells us that, again, if you go back to SKS microfinance situation back in 2011, finally the law, fell in the right place. So I'm hoping that these state legislations will not derail it. So that's another opportunity I'm looking at. I think, some of the InvITs and REITs, in a risk-averse environment, they should also do very well. So that's another area which looks quite interesting.
All right, interesting themes and interesting sort of perspective there. Ashwini, we'll leave you, and of course, look forward to chatting more over the coming days and weeks as the situation develops. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
With that perspective. Really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.